At a tense family dinner, my sister-in-law suddenly accused me, "You stole my wallet." I denied it, but she smirked and pulled the wallet from the bag beside my chair. "See? I knew it was you." When Sienna reached into my tote bag and pulled out her own wallet, she looked at the table with the satisfied smile of someone who had rehearsed this moment. I looked at her and started laughing, not a polite, nervous laugh, not the kind that says, "Please don't be angry with me." The deep, genuine kind. The kind that fills a room and makes everyone in it deeply uncomfortable because it doesn't fit the script that was written for you. Sienna's smile collapsed like a building whose foundation had just been pulled. She didn't understand yet. She thought the laughter was a breakdown, a crack, proof that she'd finally broken me after 3 years of trying. She was about to find out it was the opposite. Part 1. The woman who smiled like a knife. I need to go back. Because to understand what happened that Sunday evening in my in-laws' dining room in Naperville, Illinois, you have to understand who Sienna was, and more importantly, who she was to me. My name is Rachel. I'm 34 years old. I work as a data security analyst for a mid-sized consulting firm in Chicago, a job I spent 6 years building from a junior help desk role. I am not dramatic. I am not fragile. I am, by most measurements, the kind of person who reads the manual before assembling furniture and keeps receipts for things she bought 2 years ago. My colleagues call me methodical. My husband Evan calls me the most annoyingly prepared person he has ever loved. I tell you this because what follows is going to sound, at certain moments, like something a paranoid person would do. I need you to understand that I am not paranoid. I am thorough. Evan and I met at a mutual friend's birthday dinner in 2018. He was quiet, thoughtful, the kind of man who listened to you finish your sentence before he began his. We dated for 2 years before getting married in a small ceremony in 2020. Just family and close friends, pandemic restrictions being what they were. I thought of it as intimate. Sienna, I later learned, described it to her friends as budget. Sienna had been married to Evan's older brother Mark for 5 years by the time I entered the picture. She was 38, beautiful in the precise, effortful way that suggests it is also a full-time occupation. Silk blouses on Tuesday mornings, highlights that cost more than my car payment, nails that had never once been chipped in my presence. She was charming to strangers and to anyone whose approval she needed. She did not need mine. From the moment Evan introduced us, a casual Saturday brunch at his parents' house in November 2018, Sienna had regarded me the way a homeowner regards a water stain on the ceiling, not with open hostility, with weary, disappointed concern. "Oh, you work in IT?" she said when I mentioned my job. The pause before IT was microscopic but surgical. When Evan and I announced our engagement, she hugged me warmly in front of everyone and murmured against my hair, "Congratulations. I really hope it works out for you both." The way you might say it to someone boarding a flight with a questionable safety record. When we bought our first house, a 3-bedroom in Oak Park that I had saved obsessively for over 4 years, she visited once, stood in the kitchen, looked around slowly, and said, "It's cozy." Then quieter, to Mark, but loud enough, "She must be good at math." I documented each of these moments, not obsessively, not with any plan to use them. More the way you document water getting into a basement, because you've learned that small things, left unaddressed, become structural. Evan knew. Of course Evan knew. He had grown up watching Mark give Sienna whatever she wanted, and he had seen what happened to the people she decided to resent. His cousin Dana had been quietly exiled from family gatherings after a disagreement with Sienna over Christmas plans. His childhood friend Pete, who'd been close to both brothers, stopped getting invited after Sienna decided he was a bad influence. Sienna didn't explode at people. She simply rearranged the furniture of everyone's social world until certain people were no longer in the room. I had refused to be rearranged. I think that was my original sin. Part 2. The dinner I almost didn't attend. The Sunday dinner in March was my mother-in-law Patricia's idea. She hosted family dinners 6 or 7 times a year. Roast beef, good wine, the kind of evenings designed to paper over the fault lines in the family with enough warmth and good food. Patricia was a gentle woman, the sort of mother who still ironed her son's shirts when they visited and kept a photo of every grandchild, niece, and nephew on the refrigerator. She saw what Sienna did to me, I believe. She chose most of the time not to see it loudly. Evan had asked me that morning if I wanted to skip it. "She's been getting worse," he said, sitting on the edge of our bed while I got ready, his voice carrying that carefully neutral tone he used when he was actually worried. "The thing she said at Christmas about your promotion." "I'm going," I said. "Rachel, Evan." I met his eyes in the mirror. "I'm not going to let her take Sunday dinners from me too." He nodded. He understood. He had always understood, even when understanding wasn't enough to fix anything. We arrived at 5:30. Patricia had made roast beef and roasted potatoes, the smell of it filling the house in a way that almost made everything feel normal. My father-in-law George, a retired civil engineer, a man of very few words and enormous quiet authority, shook Evan's hand and kissed my cheek. Mark and Sienna arrived 7 minutes after us. Sienna was wearing a cream cashmere sweater and pearl earrings. She kissed Patricia on the cheek, handed George a bottle of wine, and then looked at me with that pleasant, blade-thin smile. "Rachel, you look tired." "I'm great, actually," I said. "Thanks." She tilted her head slightly, a millimeter of surprise, and then moved into the kitchen to compliment Patricia's tablecloth. I set my tote bag beside my chair at the table. It was a black canvas bag I carried everywhere. Laptop, phone charger, Tylenol, snacks, a notebook, and miscellaneous personal items. I had brought snacks for Patricia and George's neighbor's grandson, who sometimes visited on Sundays. A little boy named Oliver who liked fruit gummies and would would hover at the edge of the dining room waiting to be noticed. Oliver wasn't there that evening, but the bag was. Here is where I need to slow down. Approximately 40 minutes before dinner was served, I excused myself to use the hallway bathroom. It's a small bathroom just off the main corridor, maybe 30 feet from the dining room. I was gone for 3, maybe 4 minutes. When I came back to my chair, I noticed my tote bag was slightly different from how I'd left it. I am precise about my belongings. It comes with the job. My work requires attention to the physical position of devices, bags, and documents, because our clients include financial firms with real security protocols. I had left my bag zipped, handles folded inward. It was now unzipped, handles splayed out. I looked around the room. Mark and George were in the living room watching the end of a game. Evan was helping Patricia in the kitchen. Sienna was standing near the far end of the dining room, examining a framed family photo on the credenza, her back to me. She didn't turn around. I stood very still for a moment, then I made a decision. I didn't say anything. I didn't zip the bag back up. I didn't check its contents. Not visibly. Not in a way anyone could observe. Instead, I sat down, reached into my coat pocket, and retrieved my Samsung Galaxy work phone. I placed it face down on the table beside my water glass, angled toward the tote bag, half tucked under a folded cloth napkin. Our firm uses a mobile security application called Sentinel View. It's standard issue for all analysts with clearance above level 2. One of its features is passive motion recording. When the device is face down and stationary, it activates the front camera on a low-power loop, time-stamping footage in 3-second intervals. It's designed for meeting rooms and client sites where devices might be tampered with. I had never used it for something like this. I activated it. I left the phone on the table. I went to help Patricia carry dishes. Then I sat down for dinner and waited. Part 3. The performance dinner started pleasantly enough, which is its own kind of tension. Pleasantness in that family, at that table, always felt like the quiet before a controlled demolition. Sienna was subdued, not warm, but quieter than usual, which in retrospect was its own signal. She was the kind of person who needed to perform, who used conversation the way other people used weather as a social lubricant. Her silence that evening was purposeful. She was conserving herself. We ate. George commented on the roast. Patricia asked Evan about a project at work. Mark refilled his wine twice in the first 20 minutes. I watched the table, kept my hands loose in my lap, and ate my dinner. 43 minutes into the meal, Sienna froze. She stopped mid-sentence, something about a restaurant she and Mark had visited, and looked down at her chair with a frown. "My wallet," she said. Mark looked at her the way a man looks at a storm he has learned to see coming. "Sienna, I had it. It was right here." She stood up, patting the sides of her chair, the seat cushion, checking under the table edge. Then she looked at me. The room shifted. I know what a performance looks like. I've watched enough of hers to recognize the architecture. This was the moment she had been building toward since before dinner started, since before she walked through the front door, I suspect. Maybe since she woke up that morning. "It was right here," she said again, slowly, her eyes landing on my tote bag. "And now it's not." "Sienna," my mother-in-law said carefully, "it probably slipped. It didn't slip." She said it firmly, without heat. The calm certainty of someone following a prepared script. I know exactly where I put it. She looked at me with a kind of tired, almost resigned disappointment. The expression of a woman who has suspected something for a long time and is finally, reluctantly, being proven right. "You took it." The words hit the table like something dropped from height. "I want to describe to you what it felt like to be accused of stealing at a table surrounded by your husband's family, by a woman whose contempt for you has been such a constant background frequency that you have stopped noticing it, the way you stop noticing the hum of a refrigerator, and then suddenly it stops, and the silence is louder than anything." My face was hot. My hands were still. "What?" I said. "Don't act surprised." She walked around the table toward me, unhurried, the way someone moves when they believe they've already won. "You're always watching things, other people's things, like you're worried about what you have." She glanced at Evan. "It's something I've noticed for a while." Evan's voice was tight. "Sienna, stop." Mark said nothing. He was watching with an expression I can only describe as waiting, the look of a man who does not entirely disbelieve what his wife is saying and is curious how it will end. "I didn't take your wallet," I said clearly. Sienna tilted her head. The blade smile returned. "Then you won't mind." She gestured toward the tote bag beside my chair. "Go ahead," I said. I want to be precise about what I felt in that moment. It was not fear. It was not even anger, exactly. It was something colder, the particular clarity that comes when a situation resolves into its true shape. I had spent 3 years managing Sienna's contempt, moderating my reactions, second-guessing my perceptions. And now here she was, doing the thing I had always suspected she was capable of in front of everyone, and there was nothing ambiguous about it. She reached into my bag. She made a show of it, rummaging with theatrical distaste, as if the contents offended her. Her face was arranged into an expression of grim necessity, a woman doing an unpleasant thing because someone had forced her to. And then she pulled out her wallet. Brown leather, silver clasp. She held it up at shoulder height, turning it so everyone at the table could see. "There it is," she said. The silence that followed was different from the one before. That first silence had been shocked. This one was heavier, the weight of a room full of people revising their understanding of a person they thought they knew. George's eyebrows rose slowly. Patricia covered her mouth. Evan had gone completely still beside me, the stillness of a man trying to process 2 contradictory pieces of information simultaneously. Sienna's smile widened. It was the most genuinely happy I had ever seen her look, and I laughed. Part 4. The phone on the table. The The laughter caught her off guard in a way nothing else could have, because she had prepared for every other response. She had prepared for tears, for denial, for anger, for the flustered, desperate energy of someone caught and cornered. She had not prepared for amusement. "Why are you laughing?" she snapped. I composed myself. It took a moment, genuinely, because the relief of it was overwhelming, and looked at her. "Because that's exactly what I was hoping you'd do." She stared at me. "What is that supposed to mean?" I looked around the table. George, Patricia, Mark, Evan. I had their complete attention in a way I had never had it before in that house. "Before dinner," I said, "I went to the bathroom. When I came back, my bag was open. I'd left it zipped." Evan turned to me sharply. "I didn't say anything," I continued, "because I've learned something about this family. When I raise a concern about Sienna, I'm told I'm being sensitive. When I notice something she's done, I'm told I'm imagining it. When I push back, I'm called intense." I looked at Sienna steadily, so I didn't push back. I prepared. Sienna's expression shifted, not to guilt, not yet, but to a new alertness, the animal instinct that something has changed in the environment. "I left my work phone face down on the table before dinner," I said. "Our firm uses a security application called Sentinel View. When the device is stationary and face down, it records motion with timestamps." I paused. I aimed it at my bag. The room was absolutely silent. I picked up the phone from where it still rested, half under the napkin, and placed it in the center of the table. I pressed play. The footage was 31 seconds long. The angle was low, the edge of the table, the leg of a dining chair, the dark canvas side of my tote bag. For the first 7 seconds, nothing moved. Then a hand entered the frame from the right side. A woman's hand, ring on the index finger. A distinctive oxidized silver band I had seen every Sunday dinner for 3 years. The hand paused. Then it reached into the bag. The angle wasn't perfect. You couldn't see a face, but you could see the wallet being withdrawn from somewhere near the body and lowered carefully into the bag. The zipper was nudged open further. The hand withdrew. 31 seconds, timestamped 5:52 p.m. 12 minutes before Sienna discovered her wallet was missing. The video ended. Patricia made a sound I had never heard from her before. A small, wounded noise, like someone who has just been told a diagnosis they had hoped was wrong. George stared at the phone, then at his hands, then at Sienna. Mark looked at the phone for a long time. When he finally looked up, his face had the blasted, flat quality of a man rearranging something foundational. "Sienna," he said quietly. "She moved fast, faster than I expected." "That's edited," she said. "You can edit timestamps." "Not on Sentinel View," I said. "It runs on our firm's encrypted server. The timestamp is server side, not device side. I have the raw file and the server log." I reached into my bag, the bag she had just had her hands in, and placed a folded piece of paper on the table. "That's the verification code for the Sentinel View cloud record. Anyone can check it." This was true. I had pulled the server confirmation before dinner, on a hunch. The hunch that if something was going to happen, I would want it thoroughly documented. 3 years of Sienna had made me the kind of person who prints the server log before dinner. Sienna stared at the paper. "You set me up," she said. Her voice had changed. The performance was collapsing into something rawer and uglier underneath. "I protected myself," I said. "This is insane," she said, turning to Mark. "This is insane. She set this whole thing up." "I left a phone on a table," I said. "You planted evidence to have me accused of theft in front of your husband's family." Mark looked at his wife with an expression I had never seen on his face before. Not anger exactly, something more private. The look of a man who is realizing that something he chose to ignore has now become impossible to ignore. "Tell me," he said, "that you didn't do this." Sienna held his gaze for a moment. And then, and this is the part I will remember for the rest of my life, she lifted her chin and said, "Of course I did. She needed to be taught a lesson." Part 5. The collapse. What followed was not the clean, satisfying explosion of a movie confrontation. It was messier than that. Uglier, the way real things usually are. George said quietly, "A lesson. She walks in here," Sienna continued, her voice rising now, losing the careful modulation she normally maintained, acting like she's above everyone, like she's so much better because she has a career and a house, and she gestured at Evan, him, like she won some prize. Evan's voice when he spoke was very quiet and very even. "She is my wife, and she's been looking down on this family since the day she arrived." "No," Evan said. "That has never been true." "Evan, you have made her feel unwelcome in this family since the first time I brought her here." His voice stayed level, but his hands on the table were flat and pressing down, the way someone presses down to stay controlled. "And I let it happen. I kept thinking you'd stop. I kept giving you the benefit of the doubt because you're Mark's wife, and I didn't want to create a problem." He paused. "I created a bigger problem by doing nothing." Sienna turned to Patricia. "You know what she's like," she said, appealing, looking for the ally she'd always been able to count on. "You know she's always been." Patricia looked at Sienna for a long moment. Patricia, who ironed her son's shirts and kept every grandchild's photo on the refrigerator and served roast beef 6 times a year in the hope that warmth could smooth over fractures. "I watched you," Patricia said slowly, "for 3 years, because I wanted to believe I was misreading it." She looked down at her hands. "I wasn't misreading it." Sienna's face flickered. "Oh, please," she said, but the performance was fully gone now, and what came out was something bitter and unguarded. "You let me do whatever I want because you like me. You always have. I'm the one who actually makes an effort with this family. I'm the one who—" "Stop." George's voice, when it came, was the quietest it had been all evening, which made it the most authoritative. He looked at Sienna with the focused clarity of a man who spent 30 years years solving structural problems. Give me the wallet. Sienna looked at him for a moment. Then she set it on the table. George picked it up, looked at it, and placed it in front of me. This belongs to the house, he said, meaning not to her, meaning the accusation is withdrawn, the evidence stands, and the floor of this room belongs to someone else now. Sienna looked around the table, at George, at Patricia, at Mark, at Evan, and I watched her realize that she had miscalculated. Not the plan itself, perhaps, but the outcome. She had expected me to collapse. She had not expected me to be ready. You wanted this, she said to me, her voice dropping to something private and vicious. You wanted to humiliate me. I wanted one dinner, I said, where I wasn't the problem. Mark stood up. He didn't say anything to Sienna for a moment. He looked at his brother, at Evan, and something passed between them, a communication too old and specific for me to read. Then he said to Sienna, "We're leaving. Mark, we're leaving." She opened her mouth, closed it, looked once more around the table, found no purchase anywhere, and walked out of the dining room. The front door opened and shut. George looked at Mark. "I'm sorry," Mark said simply. George nodded once. Mark followed his wife out. Part 6. The aftermath. The dining room was very quiet. Patricia picked up her fork, set it down, picked it up again. Evan reached under the table and took my hand. His grip was tight. Not comforting tight, but holding on tight. The grip of someone who has just watched the ground shift and is making sure the person beside them didn't move with it. "I'm sorry," he said. Not to the room, to me. "I should have." "You don't need to," I said. "I do." He looked at me. I knew what she was doing. I told myself it wasn't that bad, or that it would stop, or that if I pushed back it would get worse. He shook his head. "That's not an excuse. That's just what I did." "I know," I said. George poured himself a glass of wine and stared at the tablecloth. Patricia began quietly clearing plates, the way she always did when she didn't know what else to do with her hands. I sat there and felt, for the first time in 3 years, the specific relief of something that has been held in finally being allowed to exist outside the body. The accusations, the small cruelties, the relentless subtle campaign of diminishment, it had all been documented, witnessed, and named, not by me in a private complaint to Evan, by Sienna herself in front of everyone who mattered at the table she had tried to remove me from. She had done it to herself. I had simply made sure there was a record. Part 7. What came next? I want to be honest about what happened afterward, because this is not a story where everything resolves cleanly and immediately. Mark and Sienna did not separate that night. I don't know exactly what was said in their car or in the days that followed. What I know is that Mark called Evan 2 days later and spoke to him for nearly an hour, a conversation Evan summarized for me afterward as a long time coming. Mark had apparently known on some level that Sienna's treatment of me had been deliberate and sustained. He had chosen for years to frame it as a personality conflict, as two strong women who simply didn't get along. The video removed that framing entirely. 3 weeks after the dinner, Sienna sent me a text message. It was 4 sentences long. It acknowledged that what she had done was wrong. It did not explain why she had done it. It did not ask for forgiveness. It closed with, "I don't expect you to forget this." I found the honesty of that last line, perversely, to be the most human thing she had ever directed at me. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. My mother-in-law called me the day after the dinner, early in the morning, before Evan was awake. She apologized, not in a brief, face-saving way, but at length, in the careful way of someone who has thought about what they want to say. She told me she had seen things she had chosen not to act on. She told me that was a failure on her part. She said, "You should have felt safe here from the beginning, and you didn't, and that's partly my fault." I told her I appreciated that. I meant it. George never mentioned it again. But the next time I arrived at Sunday dinner, 6 weeks later, at Evan's cautious insistence, Sienna not present, he met me at the door, shook my hand rather than just nodding, and said, "Glad you're here." From George, that was an entire speech. Epilogue. A year later. It is now 14 months since that dinner. Sienna and Mark are still married, as far as I know. They attend family events less frequently. When they do attend, Sienna is polite to me in the way a person is polite to someone they are slightly afraid of. Careful, clipped, without warmth but without hostility. It is, honestly, the best version of our relationship I have experienced, and I have made my peace with it. Evan and I bought a bigger house last spring, in a neighborhood Sienna would probably call aspirational. I don't know. She hasn't commented. I still carry the tote bag. I still carry my work phone. And yes, if I'm in a situation where something feels wrong, I still know how to place a device face down on a table and let it run. Old habits. The thing I think about most when I revisit that evening is not the video or the confrontation or the moment George told Sienna to leave. It's the moment just before I laughed, the split second when I saw her hold up the wallet and look around the table waiting for the room to turn against me. She had spent 3 years building toward that moment, the small cruelties, the careful undermining, the accumulation of tiny, unprovable humiliations, all of it pointed at a single outcome, me, exposed, ashamed, diminished in front of the people whose regard I cared about. She had done everything right by her playbook. She just hadn't known that I had been writing a different one. And when she looked at me waiting for shame, and I looked back at her with laughter, that was the moment it was over. Not when the video played, not when George told her to leave, not when Mark said we're leaving in that flat final voice. When she saw that I wasn't afraid of her, everything after that was just paperwork.